Before meal kits, before DoorDash, before grocery stores figured out they could sell a whole chicken for $5, there was Boston Market. It was a place that promised Thanksgiving dinner on Tuesday without the cooking, the dishes, or the trauma of a family gathering. And for a while, it worked really well until it didn't. And that's why today we're taking a look at the downfall of Boston Market. But before we tear into this like a hungry family going feral on a rotisserie chicken, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History Food channel. After that, please leave a comment and let us know what other dying restaurant chains you would like to hear about. Now grab that plastic spork and let's talk turkey. Chicken. Boston Market began life in 1985 under a simpler, more honest name, Boston Chicken. It was founded by Stephen Colo and Arthur Coors. And based on the name, you're probably thinking it all started right in the heart of Boston. That's a totally logical conclusion to draw, and it's also completely wrong. It actually began in Newton, Massachusetts. But Newton chicken doesn't just roll off the tongue the same way. And Boston was only about 10 miles away, so they went with a stronger brand play. Newton, Massachusetts, for the record, is a place where people appreciate practicality, efficiency, and food that feels just responsible enough to justify going back for seconds. And that mindset shaped the entire concept. The original version was refreshingly straightforward. Rotisserie chicken was delicious, felt healthier than burgers, and could be eaten at home without the shame spiral that often followed fast food. This wasn't meant to be fancy or trendy. It was meant to be reliable. It was meant to be the kind of meal that made busy moms, dads, and health-conscious eaters feel a little more superior to their neighbors that came home with a bag full of burgers. Sure, it arrived in a plastic container, but that plastic container smelled of chicken and responsibility. The first Boston Chicken locations were small and aggressively practical, built around massive rotisserie ovens positioned front and center so customers could stand there, get warmed, and zone out watching chickens rotate like edible lava lamps. It was dinner and entertainment. The menu was minimal. Rotisserie chickens sold whole, half, or quarter-sized, plus size that felt like a grandmother's hug. They were comforting, unconditional, and impossible to turn down. Mashed potatoes, creamed spinach, mac and cheese, and cornbread. It was food designed to feel homemade without any of the cooking, planning, or emotional labor. And that was the point. Boston Chicken arrived at exactly the right cultural moment. In the mid-1980s, Americans were becoming more health conscious. Not enough to give up comfort food entirely, but at least enough to not eat the whole bowl, or two. This was the era of lighter options that were somehow still heavy, indulgent, and absolutely covered in butter and gravy. And the chicken, well, that not only felt responsible, it felt practically holy. And the idea that you could bring home dinner for the whole family without cooking or ordering pizza felt like the future. Early success came quickly. Customers loved the food. The prices were reasonable, and the branding hit a sweet spot between fast food and sit-down dining. Boston Chicken wasn't trying to be exciting. It was trying to be dependable, and that made it incredibly appealing. As the menu expanded, the company realized something important. People weren't just hot for rotisserie, they were absolutely feral for the sides. This wasn't a one-protein situation. They wanted the full plate, baby. So, in 1995, Boston Chicken officially changed its name to Boston Market, signaling a shift toward a broader, cozier comfort food identity. And with that name change came the heavy hitters. We're talking turkey, meatloaf, and ham. It's the kind of lineup that makes your mouth water just thinking about it. This was no longer a chicken restaurant. It was a full-blown meal solution. And America ate it up. Boston Market's expansion in the early 1990s was fast, fearless, and in hindsight, wildly optimistic. The company rocketed from a single location to 83 restaurants by 1993, then took its stock public that same year with shares priced at $20. It quickly became one of the hottest IPOs of the decade. In a single day, the stock jumped from $20 to nearly $49 a share. By the end of 1996, it had nearly doubled again. Some say investors simply loved the story and the stock as much as they loved the mac and cheese. Others point to a more cynical reality. Allegations that shady boiler room operators were pumping the shares for their own personal gain. Yes, shocking. Questionable behavior on Wall Street? Unclucking believable. By 1996, the chain had ballooned quicker than a chicken on growth hormone. hormones to nearly 1,000 locations, with plans to open thousands more. At its peak, Boston Market would reach roughly 1,200 restaurants across the United States, making it one of the fastest-growing chains in the country. It went national quickly, spreading to the Northeast, Midwest, California, Florida, and Texas. International experiments followed, including locations in Canada and Australia, though those expansions would later quietly disappear. It wasn't just the franchise that grew. The menu continued to grow too. Prime rib eventually joined the lineup. Ribs were introduced. Seasonal promotions rotated constantly. Sandwiches were added because the brand wanted to be everything to everyone who wanted comfort food without commitment. Catering also became a major focus, especially around holidays. Boston Market positioned itself as the place that could save Christmas if the Bumpus's dog busted in and ate your turkey. Marketing leaned heavily into what we all want: warmth and familiarity. Commercials emphasized family dinners, wholesome meals, and the idea that Boston Market was helping you take care of the people you loved, even if that person was just you. They realized quickly that they weren't just selling food, they were selling the feelings of a Sunday dinner with dad sleeping on the couch and your mom and sister fighting in the kitchen. It wasn't flashy, and it didn't need celebrities because it was selling memories and reassurance. And for a while, that reassurance felt rock solid. But like any story involving mass chicken production, things get messy behind the scenes. Very messy. Boston Market's breakneck expansion was being powered by chicken leg-sized profits and Thanksgiving-sized optimism, a combination that quickly led to massive debt and even bigger problems. The company leaned hard on development fees, franchise royalties, and increasingly expensive loans to keep opening new locations at a dizzying pace. On paper, the growth looked incredible. In reality, many individual restaurants were barely turning a profit, if they were turning one at all. Boston Market wasn't growing a business so much as sprinting on a financial treadmill, expanding faster than it could possibly sustain itself. And then the bill came due. Just 2 years after announcing its massive expansion plans, Boston Market needed help from 11. No, a different 11. In 1998, they filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. The company had lost hundreds of millions of dollars, and all the fluff that had once dazzled Wall Street had been thoroughly plucked away. Analysts who cheered the growth story suddenly weren't impressed anymore. Some had warned years earlier that restaurant chains growing more than 25% annually almost always hit a wall. Boston Market didn't just hit it, it ran straight into it like Wile E. Coyote, holding an Acme blueprint and absolutely convinced the laws of physics didn't apply. Later that same year, the fall became official when McDonald's swooped in and purchased Boston Market. And was it because of the beloved rotisserie chicken? Absolutely not. It was about the real estate, baby, which had to sting. McDonald's wasn't emotionally invested in comfort food. It was strategically invested in square footage. Under McDonald's ownership, many Boston Market locations were quietly shuttered or converted into other McDonald's-affiliated brands. In some cases, the only thing left behind was the greasy fingerprint of a once loyal customer. The chain technically survived, but its momentum was gone, drifting away like a feather in the drive-thru breeze. McDonald's eventually cut bait and sold Boston Market in 2007 to Sun Capital Partners, a private equity firm that specializes in buying struggling brands with the hopes of unlocking value. Sun Capital immediately rolled up its sleeves and attempted a comeback. There were initiatives, there were programs, there were earnest attempts to modernize operations, polish up hospitality, and refresh the menu with dishes meant to make the experience feel elevated instead of dated. Some locations saw modest sales bumps, just enough to spark hope. But it wasn't a revival. It was more like a pulse, proof that the brand was still alive, not that it was ready to run again. The real problem wasn't the food. It was the competition. Grocery stores had finally cracked the rotisserie code, and then Costco showed up and flipped the table like a real housewife. Suddenly, supermarkets were selling whole chickens for less than Boston Market could charge for a quarter chicken. The thing that once made Boston Market feel special, the hypnotic spinning bird and the promise of an easy dinner, was now everywhere. Rotisserie chicken had gone from destination dining to aisle 6. And once your signature move becomes something people grab next to paper towels, it's game over. Rebrands came and went. Menu items rotated in and out like a confused dinner theater. The brand struggled to figure out what it even was anymore in a fast, casual world increasingly dominated by Chipotle, Panera, and a wave of newer concepts that felt fresher, faster, and endlessly customizable. Boston Market didn't evolve so much as drift. What once felt charming and nostalgic started to feel dated and unnecessary. Less a destination, more a vague memory. The kind of place you swear you loved, but can't quite remember when or why you stopped going. Then, in 2020, Sun Capital handed Boston Market off to Engage Brands, part of the Rohan Group and owned by Jay Panja. At the time of the sale, the chain still had more than 300 locations, which meant they weren't exactly thriving, but very much alive. Panja immediately promised a bold comeback, boasting that he was opening 2 restaurants per week. The redemption arc was back, baby. Bigger, louder, and wildly optimistic. Spoiler alert, it did not last. Panja rolled out aggressive cost-cutting measures that almost instantly spiraled into chaos. Suppliers went unpaid, rent went unpaid, employees went unpaid, and then came the lawsuits. Yes, they were getting sued by everyone: vendors, landlords, and workers who simply wanted to be paid for doing their jobs. U.S. Foods alone sued Boston Market for more than $11 million in unpaid bills. Courts repeatedly ruled against the company, often by default, because Boston Market didn't even bother to show up. The comeback narrative didn't just collapse, it face-planted. In 2023, the situation finally boiled over like a rotisserie fire no one bothered to put out, leaving behind smoke, grease, and chaos everywhere. The state of New Jersey shut down 27 Boston Market locations over wage theft violations, after investigators uncovered hundreds of thousands of dollars in unpaid wages. And that was just the start. Other states began circling like hungry relatives at a potluck, launching their own investigations and enforcement action. Restaurants started closing suddenly, sometimes with no warning, sometimes without even telling the staff. Eviction notices were taped to doors. Entire regions went dark almost overnight. What had once been a national chain was now collapsing in real time, one shuttered storefront at a time. 2023 began with Boston Market clinging to roughly 300 locations nationwide. By late 2023 and into early 2024, that number had cratered to a meager 79. In a single year, more than 200 locations vanished. Bankruptcy filings came and went. Appeals were filed and swiftly dismissed. Judges openly criticized the company's behavior from the bench, an unmistakable sign that patience had officially run out. What had once been a national chain wasn't just struggling anymore. It was in free fall, collapsing faster than anyone could slap a temporarily closed sign on the door. By 2024, Boston Market had been reduced to a handful of locations. Early in the year, reports put the number at around 27. By the end, it had dwindled to roughly 16. Even the company seemed unsure of what still existed. Its own store locator became unreliable, listing restaurants that had long since closed. At that point, the website felt less like a locator and more like a shrug, as if to say, "We think these are here." Finding an open Boston Market wasn't a dinner plan anymore. It was a scavenger hunt. Today, the brand exists in just a few states, clinging to life mostly through frozen meals sold in grocery stores. The restaurant chain itself is effectively defunct. Increased fast casual competition, years of poor management, repeated ownership changes, and the fallout from the pandemic all played a role. But the final blow was operational chaos. Boston Market never recovered its identity. It tried to be modern without committing. It tried to be nostalgic without protecting its foundation. And when things went wrong, leadership failed to meet even basic obligations. As for the future, it's hard to imagine a full-scale revival. The name still has recognition, but the trust is gone. And in the restaurant world, trust is kind of a big deal. Boston Market may limp on as a grocery store label, a licensing experiment, or a cautionary tale taught in business schools, right after the phrase, "And then it got weird." But as a national restaurant chain, its moment has passed. Boston Market didn't fail because people stopped wanting comfort food. Americans will never stop wanting comfort food. It failed because comfort requires consistency. It means showing up, paying people, keeping the lights on. And Boston Market lost that when it mattered most. So the next time you grab a rotisserie chicken from the grocery store, take a moment to remember the chain that helped make it mainstream. It wasn't perfect, it wasn't fancy, but for a brief, glorious window, it nailed dinner. And that's more than most chains ever manage. So what do you think? And what was your go-to order at Boston Market? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're at it, Check out some of these other videos from Weird History Food.